The decisions ought not to be made about what package to use or what box to use by some guy or some gal on the warehouse floor. It should be done scientifically and it should be done consistently. Same thing with what carrier and services to use should be done by more due diligence and more care than whatever you saw on the screen that day.
Growing a business requires a holistic approach that extends beyond sales and marketing. This approach needs alignment among people, processes, and technologies. So if you're a business owner, operations, or finance leader looking to learn growth strategies from your peers and competitors, you're tuned into the right podcast. Welcome to the WBS Podcast, where scalable growth using business systems is our number one priority. Now, here is your host, Sam Gupta.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the WBS Podcast. I'm Sam Gupta, your host and principal consultant at the independent ERP and digital transformation consulting firm Elevate IQ. Even the coolest DTC brands are struggling now as the investors look for accountability and profitability. The cost of shipping and products have added substantial pressure for DTC brands to rethink their operations. Also, consumers' demand is harder to manage with their expectations of 1 to 2 days delivery. So what can DTC brands do to stay competitive in this market? In today's episode, our guest, Manish Chowdhary, discusses why acquiring customers is not enough to run sustainable DTC operations. He also discusses concepts such as GRR increase from carriers such as UPS and FedEx and their impact on the overall profitability of the DTC brands. Finally, he discusses why 1 or 2 day delivery is not optional and why each brand needs to have a unique fulfillment strategy. Let me introduce Manish to you. Manish is the founder and CEO of Pulse Commerce in Kahoot, the world's first peer-to-peer network touted to disrupt the future of commerce fulfillment. Manish is an e-commerce trailblazer, renowned speaker, and industry expert. He specializes in e-commerce strategy, business methods, innovation, supply chain, and logistics optimization. Manish holds over 10 US patents and has been featured in leading publications such as Forbes and the New York Times. With that, let's get to the conversation. Hey Manish, welcome to the show.
Sam, thank you for having me. It's a real pleasure.
Yeah, and I'm super excited to have you as well because the kind of work that you are doing, it's always exciting to learn what is happening from the technology perspective. So just to kick things off, if my listeners might not know you, do you want to start with your personal story and a little bit of what you're focusing on these days, Manish?
Absolutely, Sam. So my name is Manish Chowdhary. I'm the founder and CEO of Kahoot. Kahoot, the genesis of the idea goes way back. Perhaps over 20 years ago, I was working on a project looking at e-commerce orders and deliveries. This is early days of online and e-commerce. People were ordering a lot of digital cameras. And what I did was I plotted the orders on the map of the US. And what I discovered that a very large percentage of those orders were shipping from a vendor or a merchant in California to a consumer on the East Coast, like New York, New Jersey, and in parallel, at the very same moment, orders were being shipped for the same identical item from New York, New Jersey to California. So that just did not sit well because it did not matter, that Amazon Prime did not exist at the time, or there were no such consumer expectations of efficiency. It was to take about 10 days for the products to be delivered. And I'm dating myself here because for a number of your audience, this may not even be something that they know. However, that used to be the state of affairs. But from a first principles perspective, that made no sense. That why would you ship the same identical item in two opposite directions, 6,000 miles crisscrossing, both consumers waiting 10 days and both merchants paying excess in shipping costs. So it was a lose-lose proposition. And then I applied for some patents to implement a business method patent, and then many years later we commercialized that as Kahoot. So Kahoot is all about, and my personal journey is all about, how do you create efficiency, how do you think differently, and how do you bring value to the market?
Okay, very interesting. So I'm definitely going to peel layers into that, what's going on overall from the supply chain perspective. It's always interesting. But before we do that, we have one of the standard questions that we ask every single guest, and that is going to be your perspective on business growth.
Yeah, so business growth is challenging in the current environment. It's always challenging if you want to have blockbuster growth. Sometimes some people get lucky, as I say, or you are in a frothy market where rising tide lifts all boats, and when the tide is when you get back to low tide, that's when you see which businesses are fundamentally strong versus which businesses are not. They don't have the strong fundamentals. So I will talk more in terms of the DTC, direct to consumer, and
Yeah.
e-commerce market because that's my area of expertise, or that's where I focus on. It's suffice to say, if you look around, that DTC brands are suffering. DTC, all the darlings of a few years ago, like the Allbirds and Casper, and many of these brands that people loved, and bonobos and things like that. Many of them either do not exist anymore because they've gone bankrupt,
Yeah.
or they're having fiscal challenges. They're
Yep.
having fiscal, and this is essentially goes to to say that when the going gets tough, when people are asking for accountability and profitability, not
Yeah.
just revenue,
Yeah.
that's when real businesses are formed, and you cannot continue to use venture capital money to pay for excessive cost of customer acquisition. So, in a nutshell, what I would the businesses, especially the DTC, the direct to consumer brands, have to figure out a cost efficient customer acquisition strategy, and they need to focus on customer lifetime value. I can pay a ton of money to acquire a customer, losing customer, I'll never make a money. And that customer, if he never comes back for a second, third, fourth purchase, that business is bound to fail. So you need to, brands and retailers and e-commerce operators need to really think about strong unit economics and fundamentals. And I'm sure you probably want to peel on that. So I'll take a pause here, Sam.
Yeah, I definitely want to do that. And there are too many things going on, I guess, in that conversation. So obviously, you have the customer acquisition when you look at the unit economics. I mean, that's a different concept altogether, right? I mean, because you need to have your operations finance down. And most times when you are retailer e-commerce merchants, I don't know how many brands really care for that to be, just because they are simply trying to process the transaction. Then you also spoke about the DTC business model, which was super hot during COVID. Everybody was like, okay, this is the next best thing. Everybody was sort of riding the wave, but all of a sudden now we are in 2023 and nobody's talking about it. So tell
Yeah,
me,
and
yeah, what's going on?
yeah, so there are a lot of headwinds, right? So one, inflation.
Yeah.
You know, your your cost of goods have gone up.
Yep.
Which it's not that easy to pass on those costs to your consumer.
Yep.
We are all seeing that when you go to the grocery store, the same $50 buys half of the stuff, or maybe two-thirds of the stuff that we used to. But that's something that the consumer is struggling with. So they have less disposable income for the discretionary items.
Yeah.
And so the competition. So if you are a manufacturer of a widget or a brand, there's somebody out there trying to knock you off in China. And I'll use Allbirds as an example.
Yep.
There's so many replicas of the Allbirds shoes. It's no longer unique. It's no longer special
Yep.
anymore. I mean, yes, I think the brand is still a very good brand. However, the reality is the consumer is trading down. Second, inflation, right? So that's another, the cost of borrowing is going to be very high. So that is also putting pressure on everything that the merchant needs to do. The brand, the retailer, in a rising cost of raw materials, all the way to even shipping costs. So carriers like UPS and FedEx and USPS have consistently raised their rates year over year.
Yeah.
6.8% is the common GRI, we call it general rate increase. That is the headline number. In reality, when you peel back and you study the details, it's probably over 10%. So if your shipping cost goes up by 10%, your
Yeah.
cost of goods goes up by 10-20%, and all your operational overhead goes up by 10-20%. Just imagine, what kind of environment are you operating in, and can you really double the price of your product with your consumer without losing half of them? So all of that combined with your cost of customer acquisition, because Amazon, if you were selling on Amazon channel, it used to be mostly organic. You could get your products ranked high. Today, you cannot scroll down the page of Amazon's page without looking at all sponsored results.
Yeah.
There is very little organic. So cost of advertising is going up. Cost of customer acquisition is going up. Google is the same thing. You cannot find organic results on Google anymore. It is filled with ads. So now you combine this with the Apple's privacy changes, and you cannot track that customer. But so it's super hard to get the customer. You pay exorbitant fees to acquire and advertise, and then you cannot track that customer. So if you have a product that has slightly high purchase duration, or it's not an impulse item that you wish to come back, the brands have a very tough time retargeting you. So when you combine all of these, it is a really tough environment for the brands and retailers, Sam, and they are struggling.
Yeah, they are definitely struggling, and I don't know if this is gonna, come down right now. I was reading the news, and they were talking about the overall supply chain. I guess the challenges that we had with respect to supply chain, I don't think they are going to be there anymore. The whole demand and supply imbalance that was there, that is sort of normalizing right now. So I don't know if the rates are coming down. So cost of shipping is probably gonna come down. Okay, now cost of advertising, right? That's always interesting. And one of my friends, we had one more interview right here on WBS Talks, and I don't know, Amici, I don't understand this market. Don't ask me any questions, okay? Because I always struggled, and I was like, okay, we are hearing in the market there are no jobs, unemployment. That means consumers are probably not going to spend as much. But this guy was focusing on B2C as well, and he was arguing that B2C market, no problem whatsoever. Everybody's spending. I'm like, how is that possible? Because the economy is struggling right now, so they should not be spending. And he said that, he had data and people were spending. So B2C market and the D2C market, there was no problem whatsoever. So I don't know, what you're thinking, because, this interview was like, probably 6 months back. So there are not many changes overall from the ad perspective, I guess. So what do you think overall, from the consumer spending perspective? Is it normal? Is it coming down? Is it going up?
That's a great question, Sam. I think we live in this world of hyper connectivity.
Yeah.
And anything that you record today is going to be obsolete within 60 days at
most.
In fact, 60 days being too liberal. And I'll give you a very simple example. Meta launched Threads to compete with Twitter about 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
And it went to 100 million users in record time. And then just today, I heard the news, and I've not validated this, that the traffic is certainly plunging.
Yep.
So what it goes to show, the rise and fall or cyclical nature of our economy and business is happening at an accelerated pace.
Yep.
What comments you may have heard 6 months ago is completely irrelevant today. So to speaking, yes, we heard some news that the U.S. Consumers are feeling great right now, at least in the U.S., which that the consumers worldwide take a clue from the U.S. So U.S. is the big dog. Everybody else just follows, what generally happens in the U.S. market. So this is a very interim nature. But if I go back to, again, first principles, I would not have invented Kahoot if there was nobody asking for second-day delivery or one-day delivery 20 years ago.
Yeah.
The point being is, as human race have gone through the most catastrophic event of our lifetime, which is COVID-19.
Yeah.
So suffice to say that we cannot escape the after effects of COVID-19 completely flawlessly. So we have yet to see the pain. So the consumer's pain is probably either here already or is coming, or so I think there's a leading indicator, there's a lagging indicator, sometimes, so we have to be mindful of those. So consumers are okay.
Yeah.
They're not, people have not completely stopped spending, but I do recognize and I do believe that retailers that have items that are discretionary in nature, that are not a essential commodity. So when the consumers feel the pain, they're going to pull back. If you're not feeling it in your current business, that's great, that's awesome. But just be vigilant. Don't go out outspending yourself. This is a time to really take an introspection and go back to fundamentals and improving your business economics.
Yeah, could not agree more. So let's talk about Kahoot a little bit because obviously we need to understand how that works. And I can validate the pain that, secondary delivery, regardless of the market conditions, is always going to be there. The consumers are going to be there who expect convenience. And that's probably the reason why they go to Amazon, in my mind at least, because they have peace of mind. They have the timely delivery, which is always a big thing. So in your case, describe how the model works. What do merchants need to have, let's say, if they want to utilize Kahoot or the model, what changes do they need to make in their supply chain? How are they utilizing the platform? So describe all of that, I guess.
Thank you, Sam. So yeah, Kahoot is a very unique solution, unlike anything else on the market. What Kahoot believes in is Kahoot gives you the tools and services to implement a highly flexible fulfillment strategy. And a highly flexible fulfillment strategy is unique to each business. It's not 2-day delivery for everyone. It's not 1-day delivery for everyone. It is not delivering all the orders in the cheapest way possible from a single warehouse. So how our software and technology comes in, that we have a combination of distributed shipping software coupled with a order fulfillment network. So I'll break this down for you, what that means. If a merchant is shipping from their own warehouse, they can utilize the Kahoot software, which is the next generation shipping software, if you will. If they have one or more locations, Kahoot pretty much gives them the tools to make the right decision, what carrier to use, what service to use, how to meet the customer's promise in the most cost-effective way, and how to avoid maverick decision making, meaning the decisions ought not to be made about what package to use or what box to use by some guy or some gal on the warehouse floor. It should be done scientifically and it should be done consistently. Same thing with what carrier and services to use should be done by more due diligence and more care than whatever you saw on the screen that day. And that's the technology piece. The second is, if you want to achieve, say, 2-day delivery nationwide in the US using ground economy services, you need 5 strategic locations, 5 warehouses that are strategically located. So if you have a warehouse, let's say in Wisconsin, Madison, that's not a strategic warehouse. So that's not a great idea. Or you have a warehouse in Seattle, Washington, up Pacific North. That is not a great location. So many times merchants do not recognize the need for strategic placement of inventory. This is how Amazon works. Amazon is not black magic. None of this is Walmart Plus is not black magic. Kahoot does everything that they do and then some. So you need at least 5 strategic locations. You need to place your inventory, and this is all a function of we engage with the merchant to figure out what their catalog is, how much inventory do they have, and if that's the business goal they're trying to achieve. And then you need the technology to ensure that the right order based on inventory, what's your inventory position in each of those locations, and then routing the order to the right location, making sure the order is shipped accurately, right product going to the right customer at the right time, and giving full visibility to the merchant to ensure that they can service the customer. So that is how distributed fulfillment works, and Kahoot enables brands and retailers of all sizes to do that very, very well.
So very interesting. So I definitely want to know a little bit more there, why 5 locations and why Wisconsin as well as Seattle, they are not going to be strategic locations. And is it based on the map that you need to be north, south, west, east? So tell us more about that.
That's a great question, Sam. So again, it is based on the 2 things, the population of the US, where is the bulk of the population? And number 2, it is based on the carriers.
Okay.
What is the coverage of UPS ground from each of these locations that can deliver within 2 days guaranteed, or FedEx ground or FedEx home delivery or USPS? So when you superimpose the carrier promise coverage on top of the map of the US, that's how you typically achieve what those 5 strategic locations are. And then you also need to take into consideration the merchant's own demographic of their customers, because some products are more popular in Miami, so yeah, it makes perfect sense in that case the strategic location would be in Florida. So there is no such thing as a 5 universal strategic location.
Yeah.
It's 5 locations for each merchant, and that is based on the data, based on the opportunity, and the carrier coverage broadly.
Okay, very interesting. So I am always interested in knowing a little bit about the overarching architecture, and I don't know, when you look at these merchants, I don't know if they are going to be $5 million, $10 million shop, $1 million shop, versus some of the enterprise players. Obviously, I am interested in knowing where this solution is going to fit, who is going to benefit, from it. But overall, the category that you are trying to describe, that is going to be somewhere in between. When you talk about the shipping problem, obviously shipping is typically done with a shipping software, or if they are going to be slightly more enterprise vendor, then they are probably going to use some sort of, TMS, to do the same activity that you are mentioning. But obviously they are not going to have as much intelligence, as much data, I guess AI part, that probably you have. So tell us, where do you sort of fit in the architecture? I don't know if you are sort of hanging out in very specific ecosystem. So tell us your market a little bit.
So Kahoot services brands and retailers. We don't have a maximum, so as to speak, but typically when the brands and retailers begin to do at least 10 orders a day,
okay,
shipping 10 orders a day, that's when they should begin looking at potentially considering outsourcing, at least for Kahoot. But Kahoot is designed similar to Amazon, so it can service the needs of smaller businesses, and it can also rapidly scale to meet the needs of the largest business. Because when you think about Amazon's stack of services, it does not exclude the smaller players, and that's the beauty of our platform and the nature of our service, that we want to give the SMBs the same tools as the biggest of companies. If anything, smaller businesses can be very agile and move faster than the bigger companies, because the bigger companies also have a lot of sunk costs. Like a big company that, to continue with that example, if they had already established a warehouse in Wisconsin, Madison, they're reluctant to shut that warehouse because of the implications. So sometimes those existing decisions and existing assets, so as to speak, may be liabilities, and it can help smaller merchant who has a blank canvas and a blank slate. They can leapfrog that. And so on our systems technology and our network is designed to help merchants, large and small. Obviously, we thrive for merchants who are doing less than $500 million to $1 billion. Anybody over $1 billion, they probably have their own infrastructure that they are very committed to, generally speaking.
Okay, so very interesting. So let's say if I'm the merchant and I am shipping $10, 10 orders a day, right? And I am trying to figure out, okay, what am I going to get out of the platform? Is it the commitment? Is it the promise that my customers are going to get delivery within a day? What am I getting out of it? Let's say if I utilize the platform.
That's a great question, Sam. So again, Kahoot has the industry's highest fulfillment standards. Kahoot, and I repeat that, Kahoot has the highest SLA in the industry, because Kahoot supports the most demanding program called Amazon Seller Fulfill Prime, which none of our competitors support that, because that is the gold standard of fulfillment, which means our Kahoot services are designed to be on par with Amazon Prime. And that's, and in fact, even more, because Amazon holds third parties even more accountable than themselves. So that is already proven that Kahoot. So now it depends on the merchant's goals. If they wish to target 2-day delivery nationwide, then we will recommend place your inventory in 5 locations. If they want to target 1-day delivery nationwide and they have enough inventory in stock and they're committed to replenishing, which requires capital. It's not just your desire, but if you cannot replenish your inventory and you cannot bring inventory fast enough, then that model is not going to work. In that case, you need 10 locations. These are numbers, these are actual data and through scientific studies. However, in many cases, 2 or 3 locations may be sufficient for most sellers, because an East Coast location, a West Coast location, and maybe in the middle of the country, that may be sufficient. Or sometimes, if the merchant is too small, they might just serve just fine by having 1 or 2 locations, because there's no merit to distributing that inventory if the sales volumes are low, because so all of those factors go into play. So there is no one universal truth. The key is working with the right partner and understanding your total cost of ownership. And I'll give you examples. You mentioned talking about stories.
Yeah.
We talk about stories all the time. A merchant brings in inventory to, let's say, the port of Houston, Texas, because for whatever reason, they decided that that was the cheapest container rate to Houston, Texas. But just imagine the rest of the population lives in New York, lives in California. So you saved a lot of money in bringing that container to Texas,
Yeah.
but you're paying more for every outbound shipment, and your customers are not as happy because it's taking longer.
Yeah.
So what merchants need to understand is to really evaluate the total cost of ownership. You may have saved $1,000 on your container cost, perhaps, but then now you're paying for it in other ways. So you have to really think holistically.
Yeah, so very interesting. I mean, that story makes sense that, if you are going to have customers all over the place, then you probably should not be bringing the container to Houston. But I mean, that is probably a consulting problem. I don't know if you guys do consulting as well, but from the platform perspective, so let's say if they were to analyze, okay, if they should be utilizing the platform or not, is platform going to give these kind of suggestions that probably Houston is a bad idea, they should be doing something else?
Yeah, so it's a combination of technology and services. So
Okay.
our team engages with the client to understand. There are lots of considerations, right, Sam? The way to think about it is, if I'm going to be sending large amounts of bulk shipments to,
Yeah.
let's say, my wholesale partner, all of a sudden the dynamics change and your decisions change.
Yeah.
So there's no universal. So it is situational. So I think that my team collaborates with the client to figure out what their business needs are, how deep their inventory is, what are their plans, what channels do they have, and then we make recommendations. We have a very large footprint of warehouses in the U.S., second to none. I mean, I would say very, very large location footprint. So we have tons of facilities in just about every state you can imagine. So we can generally meet those needs for our clients as long as they collaborate. And we operate with data. We don't work with instincts, because this is another story, right? I mean, this happens all the time. We'll ask a prospect, how many orders do you do? And obviously they're busy, so they have some memory of something from somewhere.
Yeah.
And I can guarantee you 9 out of 10 times that number is wrong. What they say from their memory, or it is not accurate. I wouldn't
Yeah.
say wrong, but it's not accurate. So when you make decisions based on inaccurate data, you will invariably have the wrong decision.
Yeah.
And people get too fascinated by what's your rate card. But again, as I said, if your inventory ought to be placed in New York instead of Houston, no matter, even if you got the best, cheapest rate, you won the battle and you lost the war.
Yeah. Yeah. So very interesting. So, okay. So now I'm going to have one more question there. And I don't know, because initially when we were talking about the whole platform, so I don't know if you were more of the technology player, but now you are talking about the chain of the warehouses as well, which is probably going to be slightly more 3PL play. So I don't know if you guys position yourself as more 3PL, where you are providing the infrastructure plus the network of carrier plus the technology. Do you want to talk a little bit more about that as well?
100%, Sam. So Kahoot is a one-stop shop. So
Okay.
a client, a merchant, a brand, retailer who's looking for warehousing, fulfillment, logistics services that comes to Kahoot.
Yeah.
Kahoot collaborates with them and helps them understand where the inventory ought to be placed, and agrees on a common SLA, service level agreement, what
Yeah.
kind of agreement we want to have. And then Kahoot helps them with freight, a discounted freight, so they can move the inventory, whether it's from China to the
Yeah.
U.S. or from Vietnam, India, anywhere overseas, or within domestically. So we provide discounted freight rates so that it can be placed. Then those warehouses are Kahoot locations. So the client gets a digital platform that is a proprietary technology built by Kahoot. So they have full visibility into their inventory. And then Kahoot also automatically and natively integrates with all the popular sales channels, whether Shopify, BigCommerce, Magento, Amazon, Walmart, eBay, you name it. And we have tons of technology integration partners as well. So all orders from all channels, wholesale, retail, B2B, Macy's, Target, all of them come into Kahoot, and then Kahoot routes the order to the right location based on inventory, service levels, and all that, and then picks the cheapest carrier and service that can deliver the order within the promised commitment to the end customer and writes the information back to the sales channel so the merchant does not have to do anything manually. So Kahoot clients save a lot of operational headache. Not only do they save on discounted shipping, discounted freight, and having a holistic approach to fulfillment. And we are fanatical about our SLA or our standards, as I mentioned, because Kahoot is, in order for us to be the industry's highest standard, we have to be absolutely fanatical. In our case, our clients do not have to follow up with us, hey, did this order go out? It's quite the opposite. If there was a problem, then Kahoot reaches out to the client. So the client is getting an absolutely top-notch service at an affordable price.
Okay, amazing insights there. So that's it for this episode, I guess. Do you have any last-minute closing advice for our listeners?
I think even if my advice to you would be to come out to Kahoot.ai, www.kahoot.ai. Even if you're satisfied with your current partner, current relationship, I would urge you to explore with Kahoot what is possible, how you can elevate your customer experience, how you can reduce your cost. You'd be surprised how many times we can help you. Or if you are in the market looking for either a better shipping software or a modern cutting edge solution, I think it pays to be curious. It pays to find out what else is out there, how you can raise the game, raise the bar, because a penny saved is a penny earned.
It indeed is. And my personal takeaway from this conversation is going to be just explore the possibilities. So thank you so much, Manish, for your time. This has been a powerful episode.
Sam, thank you for having me.
Of course. I cannot thank our guests enough for coming on the show, for sharing their knowledge and journey. I always pick up learnings from our guests, and hopefully you learned something new today. If you want to learn more about Manish, head over to Kahoot.ai. CAHOOT.ai. Links and more information will also be available in the show notes. Also, don't forget to subscribe and spread the word among folks with similar backgrounds. If you have any questions or comments about the show, please review and rate us on your favorite podcasting platform or DM me on any social channels. I'll try my best to respond personally and make sure you get help. Thank you, and I hope to catch you on the next episode of the WBS Podcast.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the WBS Podcast. Be sure to subscribe on your favorite podcasting platform so you never miss an episode. For more information on growth strategies for SMBs using ERP and digital transformation, check out our community at WBS.rocks. We'll see you next time.